Alright guys, guess what time it is? It's game time. I'm playing Nin. I just had a hell of a game against this guy, Dave the Head, playing Obsidian Ghost Council. I find this deck can be sometimes pretty tough. The commander is obviously a huge pain in the ass if it gets out, because none of your sorcery solutions work on it. You can't treachery it, various things like that. And I have a playable hand right on the verge of being unplayable. But I do have Sculpting Steel and 2 land, which means if he gets a rampy draw, I can piggyback on that. So I decided to keep it. I do have 2 tuck spells, though, which work really well against this guy. If you can counter it and get it out of the game, their whole game plan tends to fall apart, because his decks tend to be just really heavy on removal, with a lot of sweepers and stuff like that to take advantage of the commander. Plays a Crossroads, and I draw into Condescend, which is awesome. At this point I'm thinking, please cast something for 2 mana. And he says go, but luckily I top deck Flooded Strand. So I'm feeling pretty comfy here. And he casts Blood Chief Ascension. This is one of those cards where it doesn't seem like it does too much, but it kind of tends to creep up on you and can turn a game that you're dominating into a bit of an uncomfortable affair. I can't Condescend it, which is what I obviously would have liked to do. And I probably would not have countered it, but I did have 7 cards in hand, and I didn't want to discard, so I decided to just hinder it. In retrospect, I think maybe putting it back on top of his deck might have been the right play here with hinder. Just make him redraw it, because I don't really care too much about it, so lapsing it is probably better than just outright countering it. And sure enough, I draw a negate next turn, which would have worked perfectly to stop the Ascension. But he just says go. I luckily draw another land here. So I see him tap 5 for his guy. And it's just one of those situations where I don't know what's in the rest of his hand. So I kind of want to get this guy out of the game. For all I know, he's got 3 or 4 more lands in his hand. So he's just going to ramp or continue to develop and just keep playing this guy. So even though I really do want to Condescend, I figure I can crumple. That'll drop me down to 6 cards in hand. I have 2 more draw steps to hit another land, or maybe I can just Condescend next turn on something he might play that's not as significant as the Ghost Council. So I think that Crumple here, even though I really would like to Condescend, I think Spell Crumple winds up being the better play. So I do that. And I draw another non-land card, Spell Pierce. And now he is going to punish me for crumpling when I could have Condescended. I would have been able to ditch this terrible card, and I would have been able to Spell Crumple the Ascendant and be in a much better position. I draw Shackles. It's useless. So now I have to do something. So this game that I felt really comfortable about, given the amount of permission I had, has started to turn into a very uncomfortable affair. He goes for murder at the end of my turn. Normally, of course, if any of you guys have watched my games with Nin, I would allow this. At the same time, because of these decks like his tend to be kind of just heavy on removal, I decide that I'm going to kind of want to protect Nin just to get a card out of my hand, because I'd have to discard anyway. And, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? I mean, maybe he could cast some white or black-white Planeswalker, which would be pretty awful, but it's a little worse than that. Yeah, not what you want to see, especially when you've got Negate in your hand and you just cast Spell Pierce to protect your 1/1. It's one of those situations where I kind of feel like a dummy. But, I mean, I can't predict the future, and I don't know he has Karn. But yeah, this game's going to get very tough now. Now I've got 2 huge problems. 6/6 lifelinking guy and a Karn with 3 counters on him. Not good. Fortunately, I ripped the Crucible, and I do have 2 fetch lands, which is awesome. And you're about to see something you never ever see. Nin in the red zone, going after Karn. So my hope here is that he's just going to screw with my hand for a bit, and that will allow me to ramp up to the Lotus and into Sculpting Steel, and then into Shackles. And I'll have, because of the Crucible, I have 6 land, and I'll have the ability to steal the Ascendant before it gets too out of control. And I kind of screw my own plan here. He uses Karn on me, of course, and I probably should have thrown away, I don't know, maybe the Condescend. It was unlikely that I'd have the room to hang on to the mana for this. And it screwed up my plans because I was going to double sculpt the Lotus. Or I was going to cast the Lotus and then sculpt it. But yeah, we're in a bad spot here. Especially because I can just like cast Gilded Lotus and all that's really doing is just giving him something to Karn. Whereas if I had 2 Lotuses, then I can do all sorts of good stuff. So he just eats that. And I sort of out of a desperation play here, I decide I'm going to throw out Snapcaster Mage. Given he's used Murder and Swords, that at least I've got something in play to put pressure on Karn. Maybe he won't attack me with the Ascendant and give me a little bit more time to get to Shackles mana. So he casts perfect guy. I've got a 2-1 out. Might as well summon a guy that makes 1/1s. Brutal. The Crucible is still working its magic. And I got Shackles out now. And Negate to protect it. So he announces his attack step here, and I figure I don't really have... I mean, worst case scenario, I can Pact a Negation if he's got something really nasty. And I got to keep this thing off my back, given how low I am. Plus, it might induce him to... make a mistake. And in fact, the reason I just realized the reason I have to use the Shackles is because he activates Sorin for the emblem effect, which would have made his Sarah send in a 7 power and make me unable to grab it. But fortunately, I have the mana untapped to steal it. And he uses Karn on my hand again. So draw Preordain. I'm going to look and hope to get something like maybe Fire Ice. Maybe Rolling Thunder would be amazing. There's just 2 artifacts, which I will ditch. I get an Arid Mesa. Horrible. But at least I can deal some damage here and start working on the Planeswalkers. I mean, this is not an ideal situation by any measure, but I've got to do something. So I send them both at Karn, and my opponent makes one of many pretty big mistakes this game when he does this. Blocks Sarah Ascendant over Snapcaster Mage. Like, why the hell would you do that? Not only is it smaller, but it's his guy. So that means I get to untap the Shackles. Like, I do not understand this logic. The only thing I can think of is that he just didn't realize that this guy's 1/1. Like, maybe he just thought it was 6/6 still. And attempted a block just for the hell of it, and then was overjoyed when he realized that he could block, and then realized that he couldn't actually block. I mean, he didn't really actually want to block. But either way, I am so happy to see that happen. Drops Karn to 5. I keep my Snapcaster Mage. I free the Shackles up. Beautiful. Now it's time to just play Nin again. But he's still got active Planeswalkers. He casts Wrath. Obviously, I have to negate that because I need this creature more than anything. So yeah, I think the play for him here is... well, if I were him with Karn, I would probably just level up Karn by eating another card out of my hand. Or I might just kill the Snapcaster Mage and make a guy to block. But instead, he kills my Crucible, dropping Karn down to just 2 counters and makes a guy. And just like that, Steel Vampire. Look at that on top. Karn liberated. How beautiful. Goodbye. Problem number 1. I play that so I can shuffle away the mountain. And he just gives himself an emblem because he knows this guy's going to die next turn. He casts Sorin. We're not going to let that happen. Down to 1 card in hand. And end of turn, shoot off his Vampire to draw 3. Counterspell, Lapse. Anybody that's watched this deck in action knows that at this point it's just academic. Away goes the Sorin Markov, or Sorin Lord or whatever. Oh, I guess that's why he did it. These guys are both called Sorin. Funny. He plays that. Just going to beat on him a little bit. Time to cast Karn. And I get the last card out of his hand, which is Death Grasp. Awesome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 10, 11, 12, 13. So he could Deathgrass for 11. Almost killing me, actually. So he plays this silly guy. Grab. Mash. I have the ability now with this extra land to shoot it for what, 9? Yeah, eat his Basilica. I'm just going to strip mine, so I can shoot it for 8, but either way, so over at this point. 4 counterspells in hand. He has none in his hand. And I've got Nin with Shackles. Game over. What a comeback. Not as dire as some games that I've played, but certainly just one of those games where it looked extremely bleak around turn 4, turn 5, and I was able to turn it around. But that's what Nin the Pain Artist does. This deck does not lose very often. Hope you enjoyed it. See you later.